Westfalen was ordered under the name Ersatz Sachsen, replacing the Sachsen, lead ship of her class of ironclads. She was laid down on August 12, 1907, at the A.G. Weser shipyard in Bremen. Like her sisters, her construction was conducted secretly. She was launched on July 1st, 1908, and was fitted out. In mid-September 1909, she was moved to Kiel to complete fitting out. However, the low water levels in the Weser River required pontoons to be attached to the ship to reduce her draft, and even then it took 2 attempts to clear the river. On October 16, 1909, before her commissioning into the fleet, she took part in the ceremony for the opening of the third locks in the Kaiser Wilhelm Canal in Kiel. She was commissioned a month later and went for sea trials, but these were interrupted for fleet training in February 1910. She completed trials on May 3rd and entered the High Seas Fleet as part of the 1st Battle Squadron, replacing the older pre-dreadnought Hanover as flagship. She was to be transported to the 2nd Battle Squadron, but this plan was interrupted when war were declared. She took part in the mission to bombard Scarborough, Hartlepool, and Whitby. In March 1915, the ship was put in dry dock for maintenance. In August, she took part in the Battle of the Gulf of Riga. By the end of August, the ship was back in the North Sea with the rest of the High Seas Fleet. She conducted a sweep into the North Sea on September 11th through 12th, 1915, which went off without any action. Another sortie also resulted in no action in late October, as did the sweep in late April 1916. 2 days later, she joined the fleet that supported Hipper's battlecruisers while they attacked Yarmouth and Lowestoft on April 24th and 25th. During this operation, Seydlitz was damaged by a mine. The fleet retired due to poor visibility and thus left the British no time to intercept them. Admiral Reinhard Scheer had succeeded Ingenol and Hugo von Paul as fleet commander, and planned another attack on British coastal locations. However, mechanical issues and the damage to Seydlitz postponed the mission until the end of May 1916. The German battle fleet departed the Jade estuary at 0330 hours on May 31st. Westfalen, like the rest of her sisters, were part of the 2nd Division 1st Battle Squadron under the command of Rear Admiral Engelhardt. This unit was the last unit of dreadnoughts in the fleet, and as stated earlier, was followed by Mauve's pre-dreadnoughts. Westfalen was with her sisters when they engaged the 2nd Light Cruiser Squadron. At 18:05 hours, Westfalen opened fire again after previously having to cease fire due to poor visibility. She targeted one of the light cruisers, likely the Southampton. Despite the short distance inside 20,000 yards, she didn't hit anything. At this point, Scheer called for max speed to pursue the British, and Westfalen was able to make 20 knots. By 1930 hours, Scheer signaled go west, and the High Seas Fleet faced the Grand Fleet for the 2nd time before being forced to turn away. The turn away put Westfalen in the lead of the High Seas Fleet. At 0030 hours on the 1st of June, the leading units of the German force engaged British destroyers and cruisers in a violent close-range firefight. Westfalen fired on the destroyer HMS Tipperary with her secondary and tertiary batteries at about 2,000 yards. Her first salvo destroyed the bridge of the destroyer along with her forward gun deck. Within 5 minutes, Westfalen hammered out more than 90 rounds before being forced to turn to avoid a potential torpedo strike. At this point, Nassau and several cruisers also opened fire on the British destroyer and reduced her quickly to a burning wreck. The gallant British ship, in very much the manner of Nelson and his crew before her, nevertheless continued to fight with her stern guns and starboard torpedo tubes. The British ship managed to score a hit on Westfalen with one of her 4-inch guns, killing 2 men and wounding 8, including Captain Redlich. At 0050 hours, Westfalen spotted HMS Broke and briefly engaged her with her 88mm guns before turning away again. Broke was engaged by other German ships, including the cruiser Rostock. Just after 0100 hours, Westfalen's searchlights found the destroyer Fortune, which was also wrecked by Westfalen and Rhineland in a matter of seconds. Westfalen also sank the destroyer Turbulent. Despite the ferocious nighttime brawl, the High Seas Fleet reached Horns Reef by 0400 hours on June 1st. With Westfalen in the lead, the High Seas Fleet reached Wilhelmshaven, where Westfalen joined her sisters in the defense of the estuary. During the Battle of Jutland, Westfalen fired 51 main battery rounds and over 176-inch and over 100 88mm shells. She was repaired by the 17th of June. She also took part in the bombardment of Sunderland in an attempt to draw out and destroy the rest of Beatty's battlecruisers. At 0600 hours on August the 19th, Westfalen was torpedoed by the British submarine E-23, 55 nautical miles north of Terschelling, and took on approximately 800 metric tons of water. She was escorted back to port by 3 torpedo boats at 14 knots. She was repaired by the 26th of September. On February 22, 1918, Westfalen and Rhineland were to support German army units in Finland. The Finns were engaged in a civil war between the Whites and the Reds at the time. On the 23rd, the two ships took on the 14th Jaeger Battalion, and early on the 24th, they departed for the Åland Islands, which was to be the forward operating base from which the port of Hanko could be secured following an assault on Helsingfors. and I'm sorry to all my Finnish listeners. The task force reached the islands on March the 5th and encountered the Swedish coastal defense ships Sverige, Thor, and Oscar II. No, I'm not going to attempt to say that in Swedish. I butchered enough languages today. Negotiations ensued, which resulted in the landing of troops on March the 7th, after which Westfalen returned to Danzig, where she remained until the 31st. She departed for Finland with Posen. She arrived in Rosario, part of the outer defense for Hanko, on April the 3rd. The Germans quickly took the port, and then the task force proceeded to Helsingfors. On April the 9th, Westfalen was off to Reval, organizing the invasion force, and 2 days later she entered Helsingfors and landed the troops, supporting them with her main guns. The Red Guards were defeated 3 days later. She remained in Helsingfors until the 30th, when the white government was firmly in power. Following this operation, she returned to the North Sea, rejoining 1st Battle Squadron. On August 11th, she, along with Posen, Kaiser, and Kaiserin, steamed out towards Terschelling to support German patrols, and en route, she suffered serious damage to her boilers, reducing speed to 16 knots. She was decommissioned and employed as an artillery training ship afterwards. Westfalen was struck from the naval list on November 5, 1919, and handed over to the Allies on August 5, 1920. She was sold for scrap in Birkenhead and broken up in 1924.